Word. Now you just have to hit continue.
I'm looking for that.
Is there any button you have to hit or no?
Leave meeting or got it?
Got it. Hit got it.
Okay.
All right, now we're good. You see me?
I see you.
All right. So, Papa, we are starting this interview for you, Robert Luther Blauser, to be able to go over chronologically your family history, how you grew up, who you interacted with, and to give many generations of Blausers, Kramers, Mitnocks, Petchies, McCoys, everyone a chance to understand who you are and what you were like. So, let's start chronologically from really your childhood, like
Okay.
how you grew up, like who, your mom, dad, your siblings, where you grew up, and all the details associated with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on July the 7th, 1931, I suppose was just a typical July day. That's the day I was born. We lived in Phoenixville on Gay Street, not too far from the corner of Church Street and Gay Street. We lived in a brick house, a double brick house. And I lived there with my mother, my father,
Mhm.
my grandmother, and my grandfather. I don't have
Why
very,
were your grandmother and grandfather there? Why did you live with your grandparents at that
I
time?
don't know why. Remember now, I was just born, and we're talking now.
Okay.
My memory at this particular time, I very vaguely remember my grandfather. His
Mhm.
name was Charles Banish Blauser. He was definitely the black sheep of the family
Why?
because that's the reason. I have no idea why. He did not get along with my father. I don't know why.
And that was your father's father,
Recollection I
correct?
have of him
Pop, that was
is
your father's. That was your father's father, right?
that was my father's father
Mm.
and my father's mother. They were the ones that lived there.
And by the way, we are recording this in June of 2021.
Yes. Uh, I remember this grandfather, Charles Banish Blauser.
Yeah.
I only have one memory of him, and that is a scowling frown on a face sitting at the top of a stairwell. That's the only recollection I have of this man. I do remember my Momo with great love and affection. She practically raised me. We lived on
Why did she practically raise you, and why did your mom
that,
and your dad not as much?
probably because my mother was working and my father
What
was
did your
working.
mom do for work?
She worked in my grandfather's hardware store. That was in Phoenixville also. The grandfather on my mother's side was the Kramer family. The Kramer family also lived in Phoenixville at that time on 2nd Avenue facing Reeves Park. When the Depression hit in 1929, the families were devastated by financial losses. Eventually, my father lost the house on Gay Street because he had no work because of the Depression. We then moved into the house on 2nd Avenue with my grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side. And we lived there for quite a few years. Then, when I was about 6 years old, we moved to Mowers Farm. Mowers Farm was located almost on the corner of Bridge Street and Schuylkill Road in Spring City. There's a gas station on that corner. Back in those days, there was a gas station there as well, but not the one that's there now. It was much smaller, a typical 1930s gas station. And next to that was Mowers Farm.
Mm.
We lived on that farm for several years. I went to school. My first grade school was now a bar down on 724. At that time, we had a first floor and a second floor. The first floor had 3 grades on it from first to third, and the second floor had grades from 3 to 6.
How
There
many
were,
grade, how many people were in each grade at your school at that time?
I beg your pardon,
How many students were in each
in
grade
each
at that
class,
time?
I'm guessing probably about 25,
Okay.
maybe 30. Uh, Actually, it couldn't have been that many because there was 3 grades all on one floor. I'm guessing for first, second, and third grades, there was probably about 30 students, maybe 10 in each
Okay.
grade. They were all what we used to call a one-room schoolhouse.
Nice.
There was no kindergartens in those days unless you went to a private one outside of the school district.
Hmm.
There's no buses. You walked to school. I used to walk from Mallers Farm down towards Spring City to this little one-room schoolhouse. We lived there for several years. And while we lived there, I can remember doing all kinds of mischievous things.
Like what?
One of the things that really set my parents off was the day that I climbed up to the roof of the silo.
What's the silo?
Now, a silo is one of those tall, round buildings that they store grain in on a farm. If
Mm,
you were a farmer, you would know what a silo is. I climbed up to the roof of this thing. They're about 4 stories high.
it's
And
pretty
just
high.
sat up there looking at the world. Of course, my parents were terrified.
That's great.
I, from that point,
Would you say, Papa, would you say, so you had your sister, Aunt Ruthie, well, I call her Aunt Ruthie, and then you had your brother, I call him Uncle Dick. Out of the three, were you definitely the more mischievous out of the three?
absolutely, absolutely, I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, I was the firstborn, and I stayed the firstborn for 7 years. After we moved from that farmhouse, we moved for a very short period of time to a little house on Hares Hill Road, and I did my second grade of school in the Kimberton Elementary School. That
Where's
building is
Hares Hill
still there.
Road? Where's Hares Hill Road? Is that
Hares
above
Hill
the
Road
David
is on
McMonagle?
724, the hill that's coming down right by where the old swimming pool used to be, and there's a traffic light there.
Okay.
That's Hares Hill Road. It's actually 724.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that back in those days, that was a tiny, small 2-lane road. It's only a 2-lane road now, but it was much smaller back in those days. There wasn't much traffic on the roads back then. And we lived there for a very short period of time. And then we moved to Pothouse Road in just outside of Phoenixville. The house that we lived in on Pothouse Road is standing there to this day. Many of the other houses that are there now didn't even exist in those days back then. My dad, while we lived on Pothouse Road, used to drive down a couple of blocks away from the house where there was an open spring, and he used to fill bottles and bring spring water back to the house.
Hmm.
And
Why would he get spring water compared to the water you had at the house? Or that was your only way of getting water?
spring water was so much fresher,
Hmm.
and it tasted better than the
Okay.
well water. That was the reason. And we were there for a very short period of time again. And then we moved to a place that my mother affectionately called the dump. And that was just I don't even recall the name of that road that was on, but it was just outside of Phoenixville. And I went to Schuylkill Township Elementary School. I believe that school is still there today. And we lived there for many, many years. I never had many friends that I recall from school doing this. I was more or less by myself most of the time. And I can't remember really having any playmates.
Hmm.
I didn't start remembering having playmates until in the year 1940. We moved to Spring City, Pennsylvania. And there is where my life seemed to blossom, if you will. It, I started to meet people. I was in the fourth grade there
Yeah.
at the Spring City Elementary School. And many of the people that I met then, I still know and today. And went through all the school and up through high school and graduated together. So my time in Spring City was probably uh, more enlightening than any other time. Keeping in mind that in 1940, before the Second World War, we lived in a different kind of world than we
Yeah.
have today. At that time, there was no television. There wasn't any supermarket grocery stores. There wasn't uh, tremendous roads where you could travel and go where you wanted with ease. There was no Pennsylvania Turnpike. There were no turnpikes anywhere. You drove on the roads that were through towns. There wasn't many country roads at all, except to get from one town to another. There was no interstates, nothing like that. Consequently, your life really revolved around a close family tie. And you had your friends and you had your family. And this was a closeness that we don't have today. Um, when the Second World War started, this opened up so much. It changed so much of the way we live. The technology seemed to just burst out, and things started to develop at a more rapid pace. Cars, electronics, everything just seemed to come out. Whereas before, you didn't seem to have all of that desire to advance. I mean, if you had a radio, fine, you had a radio. Did you change it? Did you upgrade it? No, a radio is a radio. Nobody seemed to want to advance things like they did after the Second World War. And we,
Why do you think that was that people wanted to advance so much more?
because it's the way things were. Keeping in mind
Was it
that
probably because you had a lot more people coming from other countries that wanted to change, wanted to do so much better, and had more of a growth mindset than the people that may have been in the States for a longer period of time? Do you
I
think
think the
part of it
ones
was
that
good competition like that?
I think the ones that came over originally before the war kind of went along with they went with the flow.
Yeah.
They would go with the flow. Now there were a few, of course, that did go into business, but it didn't seem to be into a business of advancing things. They just seemed to be happy with the way things were. But then when the war came along, that changed a lot, actually, because they had to. And the technology, that's when they started to have technology boom. And things really started to come on. Advent of television was one of the things that in They invented television back in the 1920s, and you never saw a television set until the late 1940s.
Mhm.
That's an example of what I was saying about not wanting to advance the technology. They had the ability to do it, but nobody ever bothered. And eventually they did. After the Second World War, we had television. And then eventually with the war, they developed a phone called a walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
Well, the walkie-talkie eventually came to what we call today a cell phone.
And to
Well,
what nothing is what
this
you're
is what
talking to me on right
happened.
now.
During the war, had it not been for the war, they never would have had a walkie-talkie.
The military, even to this day, still advances most of the technology that we have. They use it for combat and other type of purposes, but a lot of military grade products and technology now are what we call consumer products, what everyone gets to use in their everyday lives. And it is kind of incredible how we have adapted
Exactly.
this.
This is what I meant by saying the World War II brought along the
Mm.
advancement of this technology. And I can remember as a child when television first came out, these appliance store owners that sold televisions would put one in the window of the store and turn it on. And people would flock out on the sidewalks to stand in front of this store window looking at this creation, this marvelous thing called television, where you saw people in the screen looking and talking back to you. It was it was a marvel, and people were just so thrilled to have this thing. And television eventually grew from a little tiny screen. The screens for the TVs at that time were about, I would estimate, maybe 6 inches big. And keep in mind, 6 inches, that's not very big. So, what would happen? You bought this magnifying glass, especially built to stand in front of your little 6-inch TV screen. And that magnified it to as much as 12 inches.
Uh,
And eventually, they had 12-inch television. Our television set was we first one we got was in 1949, and it was a 12-inch TV. And to watch it during the day, because of the brightness, you had to draw the shades in all the rooms to make it dark. Because if there was any light, it was too difficult to see it.
yeah,
So we used to draw the shades and watch TV.
that's crazy.
And it was a TV was a family thing or a neighbor's thing. We would have so you would have a TV, and you would invite your family and your neighbors to come in and watch TV, Arthur Godfrey and all the things that they had on in those days. And you'd sit around like a family watching this television, and things started to open up more. They developed the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Mhm.
I can remember riding in the car with my brother and my mother and father, and we took a ride out the Pennsylvania Turnpike almost to Pittsburgh. Oh my golly, look at this.
Mhm.
This is a marvel to go on a highway like this and not have to stop for lights or anything. It was a big deal. It was a great thing. And here again, they kept building and building new roads, interstates, and that were to come later. But the Pennsylvania Turnpike, if memory serves me correctly, that was the first turnpike in the country.
Yeah, it
I,
might have been.
I believe it was. I'm not sure about that, but I think it was.
If you
And
could describe your relationship with your brother and your sister, what was that like? How were they?
my uh, relationship with my brother and my sister were we weren't what I would call a really, really close family.
Mhm.
We were,
Why do
uh,
you think that was?
I don't know why. I think the Kramer side of the family was very reserved. And we didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't say, I love you. There was those affectionate things were not a part of my family.
Hmm.
Uh, I think there was love there, but it just wasn't shown. Uh, we always had, uh, we were well provided for.
Mhm.
It wasn't a lack of that sort of thing. We were very fortunate in that during the Depression, when so many families were totally wiped out, we were able to exist.
Mhm.
But I don't think the family was a close family. I think perhaps today we're closer than we were when I was growing up.
Hmm.
I kind of went my way. My brother kind of went his way, and my sister kind of went her way.
What kind of way did your brother and your sister go?
Well, I went. I after I graduated from high school in 1949, I never lived at home again.
Mhm.
I went on a bus with another schoolmate to the University of to Latorno University in Texas. We went there on a bus. If I remember correctly, it took us 3 days riding this.
What about Laterno and what about Texas? Did you just want to get away from Spring City, or why did you want to go so far away?
I didn't want to go there. That's where my parents sent me. They wanted me to go to get an education, and that's the school that I went to. It was
What were the
so
other choices? Do you remember the other choices you had?
I never had another choice. That was they said you're going to
Huh.
Latorno.
Why Laterno, you think? Why do you think they picked Laterno out of all the
I
other
think they picked
universities?
Latorno because it was a Christian school.
Mm.
My mother was very, very religious, and Latorno was a very religious person. He built heavy duty uh, uh, construction equipment. That's what the Latorno company did,
Mm.
and he had started the university. Well, anyway, I went there in 1949 and only went there for about a year until the Korean War started. And I came home from break from the school, and I said, I know I'm going to get drafted. And rather than take a chance of just going into the Army, anyway, I enlisted in the Air Force. And I enlisted in the Air Force.
What did your mom and dad think about that when you were
My mom was upset
why?
uh, because I was going into the Air Force, and there was a war, and I guess she was worried. I don't know, but I can remember she was down in Philadelphia visiting her sister,
Mm.
and
Where did her sister live in Philadelphia?
she lived in well, they lived in several places because um, my uncle, her husband, was the Kazmarzik side of the family. They were our cousins, and they moved from different places in this within the city.
Mm.
Uh, different. The last place they lived, I think, was in the northeast section of Philadelphia.
Wow.
And at that time, Philadelphia was a fairly nice place to live. And anyway, my mother was visiting down there. And while she was visiting, my dad took me down to the recruiting office and I joined the Air Force. And my mother didn't realize that until she got home, and she was rather.
I guess what did
But
your dad was excited, he was happy for you to do that, or
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I went because I had my dad. in those years had his own construction business. And
Mm.
I used to work with him in the summertime in the construction business. And so I think he was not really upset with me going into the service. But then I went in the service. I was shipped overseas to England.
Yeah. Well, before that, though, I guess your brother was still in high school. Your
My
sister,
brother was still, he's 7 years younger than myself.
and
And
then
at this
Ruthie
time, I
is
was 19 at this
okay.
time.
So he was in middle school, and then Aunt Ruthie
And
was a little younger.
yes.
Yeah.
And he he was still in high school. And of course, my sister, she was 11 years younger than myself.
Mm.
But she was like in the grade school era. And I went to England
Mm.
and I met June, your grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
my wife, and we were married in 1952.
Describe the environment and how and why you met her. Like what happened, what led to that. I know it was a blind date, but
I was
how exactly did it happen and come
I
together?
was standing outside the base and just standing there, just nothing to do, just hanging out, so to speak. And this fella, not a good friend, just an acquaintance, said, "Hey, are you doing anything?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, "Would you come along with me? My girlfriend is bringing a girlfriend of hers along, and I need somebody to kind of go out with her."
And where was
I
this
said,
base at? Where was the base at in
"Pardon me."
Where was this base at in London? Where in London were you
We
stationed
went
at?
down to, if I remember correctly, it was Piccadilly Circus,
Okay.
and we took the subway into
No, where did
Piccadilly.
you live? Where was the base and where did you live?
Oh, my base was in it was outside of London. It was outside of London, about 30 minutes by train outside
Okay.
of London.
Do you know the
And
town?
Ruislip was the name of the town. And anyway, we went into town, and I met her.
And it was
Uh,
at Piccadilly Circus, you said, right?
did what?
It was at Piccadilly Square or Piccadilly Circus.
Piccadilly Circus. We got up off the train, and in downtown London, the subways are down pretty far. So you had two flights of escalators to go up before you reached the street level. That's how deep these subways were in downtown
What
London.
did you think of London? I guess coming from Spring City and Texas, which were pretty rural, London
Yeah.
was pretty a big city for you, even
Oh
bigger than
yeah, it was.
Philadelphia.
It was a big city. It was fascinating. I found London. Like, keep in mind now, London. This was in uh, 1951. In January of 1951 is when I arrived in London, and London still was showing the damages from the war,
Mm.
and there were they still had a power shortage. Consequently, wasn't they had what they call brownouts. It wasn't the
Mm.
city wasn't alight with lights or anything. There was a lot of bomb damage uh, piled up in rubble on the corners of the streets in many cases.
Mm.
Food was still very scarce. Everything was rationed. I mean, everything from
Mm.
candy to clothing. It was all rationed.
Mm.
And consequently, being in the U.S. Air Force, we got anything we wanted. We didn't have to worry about that sort of thing. They got something like one egg a week per person. Uh,
Wow.
Cheese, which they English people eat a lot of cheese. They were allowed a piece of cheese about the size of a pencil for a week.
Wow.
I used to get eggs uh, and cheese and take it down to the house. I could buy from the commissary.
Yeah.
And I used to stay down there, but I never paid them any money or did it. So I thought this way I can help them by
Yeah.
bringing
So
them.
so we'll go back to how you met Nana too. So that's what London was at the time. So
Uh,
describe the day and night So you're with an acquaintance. He said, "Hey, come up for this double
I
date."
got that your grandmother. I
Yeah.
came up this elevator and they said, there they are. And there are these two girls standing there. And there was your grandmother, tall and lean, standing there. And we
How was
went
she
to a
dressed?
movie.
Do you know what she was wearing? Do you remember what she was
She had
wearing?
a red coat on. We had this
What time
red
of the year
coat.
was it? What time of the year was it?
What time of the year?
Yeah.
This was
Okay.
in February of 1951. And she had this red coat on, a tall, thin girl there. And we went to a movie. And I don't remember much about the movie because I was looking at her more than I was the movie. And uh, we went to that movie, and then I don't remember what we did after the movie. All I can remember after going to the movie was seeing her on the bus to go back to her place. I don't know. I don't remember giving her my phone number or I getting her phone number, but obviously we must have because we stayed in contact with one another.
Mhm.
And I think we went out again the next night, and
The next night?
I think so.
Wow.
And it just, I guess, well, it was a couple of nights, we would go out, and then a couple of nights I had to work. I worked on the swing shift, and a lot of times I have to work from 4 in the afternoon till midnight.
Mm.
So obviously we didn't go out then, but we went out, and pretty soon we became more of a thing, I guess you would say.
What were some of the dates you guys went? Was it just dinner dates? Was it walking? What did you guys do?
Well, we went to the NCO club on the base,
What does the
uh,
NCO club stand for?
non-commissioned officers club,
Okay.
and we went there, and we would go to the movies. Movies was a big thing in those days.
Yeah.
Back in the 1950s, I mean, everybody went. You went to the movies. Television was, especially in England, was practically nothing. As,
Yeah.
so you went to the movies, and your grandmother loved to dance, and at that time they had places where you could go to dance, and
What
they
type
had,
of dancing did she love to do?
and I hated dancing.
What
I
type of
never.
dancing did she like to do?
And what kind of dances they
Yeah.
did? They did jitterbug, uh,
Oh, okay.
jive, uh, and then the waltz. That's what I could
Mm.
do. If they did a waltz, it's a nice slow dance. I could do that. But she loved to dance. And then she had family, cousins, aunts, and uncles that lived in Cornwall, England. That's in the south of England.
Mhm.
And Land's End is down there, some one of the places. Plymouth is down there where they left to come to the New World.
Mm.
Uh, we would go down there and uh, go to one of the seashore places down there in the summertime. Uh, they had a place that they would rent right on the beach. It was nothing more than a little cabin, like on the beach. You could go into this little cabin. You could change your clothes and go swimming, and you could have something like you could cook stuff in there,
Hmm.
like on a grill. It didn't have electricity in this thing,
Yeah.
but it was a nice place, and we had fun there. But mainly, we just went did movies. Sometimes we'd go to a pub and have a couple of drinks, throw some darts, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and that was basically it. And things just developed more and more and more. Uh, Pretty soon, we decided we were going to get married.
How did you decide you wanted to propose to her or marry her?
I did propose to her. I asked her father
Hmm.
if for her hand, and he said, "Sure, you can marry her. She'll never be the woman her mother was." But he was He was sort of an arrogant son of a gun.
How was he arrogant?
He was arrogant in that um, if you didn't like sports, you weren't any good, and he didn't want to talk to you. If you didn't agree with what he had to say, he wasn't one of your friends.
Huh.
He was a big I am guy. I am this and I am that, and he kind of instilled that in his family. You must remember, Mike, that back in the 1930s,
Hmm.
uh, the man of the family was the head of the family. A woman's place was in the home.
Hmm.
And consequently, he was a very dominant figure. Most women didn't work in those days.
Hmm.
The reason they did go to work a lot of times was because out of necessity, because of the Depression.
Hmm.
There were a few things that women did work at, but mostly they were in the home. Consequently, he was very, very dominant individual. And it was very reflected in the way uh, his children thought about him. He was the
When you
king.
say dominant, was he like, what did he do for a profession? Was he really good at his profession?
He was a production manager for a bakery,
Okay.
and he had a good job. He was an important figure in that business and for the company that he worked for. But and he was good to his family. I mean, he would say to have the family. He would give them a
How
nice
many
summer
siblings?
vacation.
How many siblings did Nana have, and what were all their names?
She had
And
she
Nana
had
was the
two.
oldest too, right? She was the oldest as well.
She was the oldest, right? Yes, Nana was the oldest of that family. She had two sisters and one brother, and
What were their
well,
names?
the names were one was Pat, one was Eva, and one was Barry. That was their names. And a little story that I have to tell you about. We had it many years later, while we were living in Florida. We got a dog, and he was a pedigree Dalmatian,
Hmm.
female, not yeah, a pedigree Dalmatian. And we had a name to put on the uh, AKC, the Kennel Club papers. What
Hmm.
is her name going to be? And we called her Princess Padley. Padley. Princess Padley. That Padley name came from Patricia, P.A., from Debbie, D.E., and from Lisa, L.I. Padley.
Ah,
That's
one
where
of your
we got
daughters. Yeah.
the first two letters of my daughter's names.
Huh.
And that's where we got the name Princess Padley.
That's cool.
But yeah, but that came many years later.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you described her dad. Unfortunately, I think I have a lot of his features when it comes to eye and dominance. I try and not show those features a lot, but I do relate to a lot of probably his personality. Can you describe what you remember of Pat and Eva and Barry and along with her mom? How was interacting with them? What was
well, her mother was she was this typical housewife. She had her thoughts, her own ideas, but because they were not the same as her husband's, she suppressed those ideas and would
what
go along with whatever
what
he.
ones did what thoughts did she have to suppress?
Um, well, for example, if one evening he said, "I want to go see this movie," well, she really didn't want to go see that movie. She wanted to go see this movie,
Yeah.
but she would give in to him. In other words, whatever he wanted to do, she would give in to that.
Okay.
And but she would wanted to do something. she would go out with your grandmother, and me, and we go do what she wanted to do. We take her out once in a while to do that.
Okay. That's
But
good.
she was a good woman. She was a hard worker, and she took care of her family. She did good. She did very well. But one little funny story about them is when they eventually, years later, when they moved to the United States, her husband, June, your grandmother's father, had to get a driver's license. So he went in to take the test for the driver's license. And uh, his wife, June's mother, said, "Oh, yes, Ted got his driver's license. And he passed at the head of his class."
Yeah.
Now, well, when you go to take a test for a driver's license, there's no class. I mean, they do it. You get in the car, you drive, and you either pass or you fail. Well, that was just so instilled in her that she had to make him look so great.
Yeah.
That was a thing it was just the way she was. She had to glorify her husband. And in so doing, he graduated at the head of his class.
That
And
is funny.
we always joked about that. Like, oh my God, remember, used to say to your grandmother, "Remember when your dad got his driver's license?" And she says, "Oh, don't remind me."
That's
It
funny.
was, it was a funny thing. But we had a wonderful time in England. For being in the service and overseas, I couldn't have asked for a better duty than what we served while I was over there. And we finally came back in May of 1954. I believe it was May of 1954. I came back to the United States
Wait,
after
you
being.
didn't come back to the United States ever since 51? You didn't come back to,
I was over in England for 3.5 years.
you never came back to visit, anything like that? No?
Well, remember, transportation in those days
Yeah.
was nothing. You didn't have jet aircraft. You had propeller-driven aircraft. Airplanes couldn't make a direct flight from New York to London or from Philadelphia to London. They always had to stop and refuel. That's what it took 3 days by ship. And that was the predominant way of travel in those days from Europe by ship.
Mm-hmm.
So traveling was not, it wasn't an option, I'll put it that way, not like it is today. So no, I did not come back. I stayed there for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And now when we did get married, though, my mother did come over to the wedding. She came over and on the ship, and we went down to Southampton and picked her up, brought her back up to London, and she stayed there for, I guess, nearly a month. And then we took her back, and she came back to the United States.
It's really
But
cool.
she did do that, and it was nice to have somebody from my family, there at the wedding. Especially, at that time, that was about 2 years. I hadn't seen anybody in my family for about 2 years.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I really didn't. Like I said before, we were not a close family,
Mm-hmm.
so I really didn't miss them that much. I mean, I could have, had I been able to continue staying there, I would have stayed there probably longer. And
Why did
but
you have to come back for your visa?
my enlistment was up,
Okay.
and
You
I
didn't want to
really,
work in London? You didn't want to work
I
in
thought,
England? You didn't want to work in London? You didn't want to work in England?
um, well, it was not what I wanted. It was what the government. You're allowed to stay so long at a base, then you have to move.
Yeah.
That's just Air Force regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So that my time, I extended my tour duty twice. And I was there for, like I said, 3.5 years, and my enlistment was up in 4. So I only had, I think, 1 or 2 months left on my enlistment. Yeah, 3 months I had left, because I got home in May and my enlistment was up in August.
Mm.
So, and at that time, if you had less than 6 months to serve, they just gave you an early discharge. So anyway, I came back and I got discharged from the Air Force,
And did Nana come with you at that time?
and Nana was already here. Uh, one of the provisions to get married over there is that you have to have the passage paid for your wife to get over. The government isn't going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we had the money and had the passage already. So she left just before I did, and she got over here. And my mom and dad went up to New York to the harbor and picked her up
And she had
from.
a green card. She was never a citizen in the United States, right? She was always a
She never was a citizen. She had a green card, but she never became a naturalized citizen.
mm.
And all the years that we lived here, she never did it. Never. She was never one for tests and stuff like that. She was always afraid she wasn't going to do it, and
Yeah.
she didn't like to do it. Consequently, she never did. But anyway, she came over first, and then I came over on the what they called an MSTS, General Darby. I'll never forget that piece of junk as long as I live. That was a military sea transport ship,
Mm.
and it was horrible. It took us 6 days on this southern thing coming from Southampton to the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. And I can remember I was never so glad to see the Statue of Liberty in my life. To get off of that damn boat. And, I have never been on a boat since. I just, I don't know. I guess maybe that turned me off about boats. I have no desire whatsoever to go on a cruise.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. But we got back to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and then my parents came and picked me up
Mm-hmm.
from Fort Dix, New Jersey. They took us from the Navy Yard down to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and that's where I was discharged from Fort Dix, New Jersey.
That's
And
pretty
then
cool.
we went from there to my Aunt Esther's house, the one that lived in the Kaczmarzyks that lived in Philadelphia. And their June was your grandmother was waiting for me, and we had our
Ah.
reunion
Oh,
right
nice.
there. And
And that was probably in the Northeast, right? That was probably in Northeast Philadelphia.
Northeast Philly, yeah. I can't recall the name of the what the section of Philadelphia that was called now, but uh, that's where it was, I believe. And then from there we went back up to Spring City. And now, what you said before about me being like living from a rural area and
Mm-hmm.
going to London, and how I thought about London. When your grandmother first got over here, I was still over in England. I wasn't back yet.
Mm-hmm.
Your Uncle Dick, my brother, took her, asked her, want to see Spring City? I said, sure. So they walked down New Street and downtown, and there's Main Street in Spring City. And they did all Main Street. And yeah, your grandmother said, this is it.
That's
And
amazing.
there's no more. That the whole town was as big as one street she lived on in London.
Yeah.
So she was. It was a kind of a change for her to go from the big city to that,
Yeah.
but she soon got used to it, and We had a little apartment over on Chestnut Street in Spring City. I got a job through the influence of my grandfather Kramer, who happened to be very good friends with the chief engineer at Bethlehem Steel in Pottstown. And he got me into their program, their structural steel program into Bethlehem Steel. Eventually, I got my structural engineering degree from them. But
So
that's
Bethlehem Steel had an education thing that you would take to then have you become a
that class is right there in Pottstown,
wow.
right there. The big brick building on Kimes Street is still there. That's where Bethlehem Steel used to own all of that property in that area.
Wow.
And anyway, I
So that
stayed.
Pottstown one was a satellite. It was a satellite campus for Bethlehem Steel. I assume Bethlehem Steel had a Bethlehem location as well.
Oh yes, yeah.
And
Was
Pottstown
Bethlehem?
was just another location for them.
That's correct. Yeah, Pottstown. They were in Pottstown, Sparrows Point, Maryland, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Birmingham, Alabama. Bethlehem Steel was the second largest steel producer in this country. U.S.
Yeah.
Steel was number one. I worked with them for about 11 and a half years. And then we moved.
So in between that time, a lot of things happened. You were in
Well,
China.
between that time, yes, when we first came back, uh, your grandmother was pregnant with your Aunt Pat, and she was born in 1955,
In
in
Spring City or Phoenixville
January 2nd,
Hospital, right?
1955. And we came back in 1954.
Mhm.
So
What
in
time
the
of the
middle,
year did you come back in 1954?
in May,
Okay.
in May of 1954, we came back. And then 3 years later, your Aunt Debbie was born.
So describe what it was like having Aunt Pat and just you guys. Did you always just live on Chestnut Street, or you guys moved a little bit around, right?
On Chestnut. We lived on Chestnut Street in Spring City, where Aunt Pat was born, and we lived there for a month. Then we
So
moved out.
you named Aunt Pat after Nana's sister who passed,
Your
right?
grandmother's sister, Pat. Yeah,
Did she pass before she was born?
no, she was still living. She didn't.
Wow.
She
She,
was still
so
living. She didn't die. Aunt Pat didn't die until 1959.
so that's crazy that Nana actually named her daughter after her.
While she was still alive. Yeah,
Were they really that close?
she was pretty close to her, to Aunt Pat. She was, and to I think she was the closest to Aunt Pat, to her
I
to her
mean, she must
sister
have
Pat.
been if she named her daughter after her.
Yeah, that's
Or
right.
Was there like a name? Was Pat like a special name in the family or something? Why name?
I think she's the only Pat that she had in that family. It
Huh.
was not a special name. No.
So did she name her after her sister, or she
Yeah,
just liked the name? She
she
did.
named her in honor of her sister. Yeah, but her sister wasn't dead yet. She had not
That's
been.
crazy.
She wasn't killed until 1959.
That's
Uh,
crazy. So like that's kind of unheard of, right? To name a daughter after someone that's alive still.
Not really.
Really? That
If
wasn't
if
a thing?
if you have a son, wouldn't you name him Mike? That happens a lot.
No, I wouldn't name him Mike, but I wouldn't name after my brother. Like I wouldn't name a child after my brother who's still alive.
But now, like my name is Robert.
Mhm.
My middle name is Luther. My father's name is Martin Luther.
Yeah,
So,
I could see the middle name, but the first name is different.
but anyway, she named Pat
Yeah.
after because of her
So what
sister.
did the family think of you having a child here with a new wife, like just coming from the service, all that?
They were excited about it.
Hmm.
She's the firstborn of a new generation. And she was the firstborn. Uh,
Hmm.
the rest of the family was yet to come. and except for the Kaczmarzyks.
Hmm.
The Kaczmarzyk family, that's your grandmother's, or actually my family. When my mother's side of the family, Aunt Esther, which was my mother's sister,
How many siblings did your mother have?
she had uh, two sisters and a brother.
Okay.
And
And
the
how many
sisters,
siblings did your dad have?
okay, he had two sisters and also a brother.
Okay. And then also, did Nana's mom or dad, did they have a lot of siblings?
Um, no, they did not. I think uh, your your grandmother's mother had a sister.
Hmm.
Your uh, mother's father had he had a brother. He had a brother, and
Do you remember their names at all?
that was it. They the names of his they slipped my mind now.
No worries.
What their names were? Yeah, but they lived in London, and the one uh, your grandmother's mother, her family was from Cornwall,
Okay.
and that's where her sister lived down in Cornwall.
Oh, wow.
And she had a cousin. Her sister had a son, and that was your grandmother's cousin. He lived down in Cornwall as well.
Wow.
But we had and most of the Kaczmarzyk children. I think you met all of them, Carol and Doris, and
Yeah.
all of them. Well, they were the only ones born, and then Patricia was born, and she was part of the newer generation to come along.
The boomers, as they called them.
Yeah, that's right. And 3 years later, your Aunt Debbie was born. And all this time, I'm still working at Bethlehem Steel.
Yeah.
And when they were born,
How did Nana interact with kids? I know she loved kids and whatnot. How did
yeah,
she love having her daughters?
yeah, she interacted well with children. She she always would talk to them, going the malls, uh, in the stores, whatever. She would always talk to them. And, oh, make a fuss over them. She
Yeah.
did. She loved children. And
How did you like having daughters, all daughters?
I really wasn't that particular. I was more concerned that they would be healthy and would be okay, more than I was what sex that they were.
Yeah.
That I think is the predominant thing that you really should concern yourself with. That the child is going to be a healthy child, and whether it's a boy or a girl, you're going to bring them up the best you can. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And,
So you have Aunt Debbie, and where are you guys living at this time?
when we had Aunt Debbie, we had just um, did we just move there? No, I think we were there. We lived in this apartment on Beach Street in Pottstown, and that building is still there today. It looks exactly the same as it did back then. All these years later, this building hasn't changed at all. It's a single story brick house right on Beach Street, just off, almost on the corner of Hanover and Beach Street in Pottstown. And we lived there when Debbie was born. And then shortly after that, we we bought a house on West Street in Pottstown. And we lived there for 8 years, I guess. And that's where your mother was born. She was born when we lived on West Street. And the interesting thing about the birth of your mother is Christmas Eve, we went down to Spring City to have a Christmas Eve celebration with my parents. And we went down and we had a good time, and we came home back up to West Street in Pottstown. And your grandmother and I got into bed and rolled over and was just going to sleep. And suddenly I felt something warm and wet on my back. Here, her water broke on Christmas Eve. And oh, she says, my water's broke. Oh, so I had to take her to the hospital.
And
And
she was born in Pottstown Hospital, or?
we went to what is now a nursing home on Charlotte Street. That was a hospital at the time. And we went there, and I dropped her off and went home. And my mother had to come up and watch the two girls
Yeah.
while I did all this. So anyway, my mother spent Christmas Eve night with us at the house. And Christmas morning, we got up, and your Aunt Pat and your Aunt Debbie came out. Where's Mommy? Where's Mommy? They didn't know she was gone. We told her, "Oh, your mommy's went to, she's going to have a baby." So that Christmas day,
Yeah.
we spent with your grandmother, your great grandmother, actually, and they opened up the gifts like the kids do on a Christmas, and then we went back down to their house in Spring City, and at 6 o'clock that evening, we got the news that she had a baby girl, and we named her Lisa.
Why'd you name her Lisa?
I have no idea why. That's just a name that we liked. We just
Yeah.
happened to like the name Lisa. And the doctor called back a little while. He said, "Oh, you got a little something extra." And I said, "Oh, Christ, she didn't have twins." He said, "No, she was born with a tooth in her mouth."
Ah.
Your mother was born with one of her front teeth,
Huh.
and, which is very unusual for a newborn baby to
Yeah.
have a tooth. But anyway, there she was. She was born with a tooth in her mouth.
Was she born late? Was she born premature?
No, she was born uh, about where she should have been.
Okay.
Yeah, she was born on Christmas Day, and actually, your Aunt Pat and your Aunt Debbie were late. They were supposed to have been in December also, but they didn't come till the beginning of January. But so
Yeah.
she was
Papa did really
born.
well. Papa did really well in March.
That's right.
As soon as the spring sprung, you must have sprung something else.
I guess so. I sprung a leak somewhere.
Yeah. What was it? What was it like when all the three girls were young, interacting with them? Like, what type of trips did you guys go on, or what did you guys
We
do for
had
fun mostly?
we were pretty close as a family. Uh, in the years following,
Also, did you because you weren't as close with your siblings and your parents, did you want to be closer with
I
your
think so.
daughters?
I think so. It really didn't wasn't a thing in my mind, but subconsciously, I think I definitely did. And we did. We were a close family. We went everywhere together, not separately. We met a lot of friends. Your grandmother belonged to the War Brides Club, as it was called, where a lot of English girls and German girls, whatever, married U.S. servicemen, came back to this country, lived in our area, Norristown, Phoenixville, this area, and they formed a club, and they called themselves the War Brides Club. Well, we probably my two very best friends uh, lived in Norristown, and whenever we go down there, we might go down like on a Friday night and spend the night.
Mhm.
We would always take the kids. We would take them, put them in the car, and they would sleep down there at those houses. We would sleep there. We never did anything without the kids. There's only one time that we had went to Niagara Falls. Your mother and myself, not your mother, your
Yeah.
grandmother and myself went to Niagara Falls and had somebody watch Pat. She was the only one born at the time.
Mhm.
And that was the only time that we ever went anywhere without our children. We always took them with us wherever we went. And whether they liked it or not, they always went. And the other two families that we were close with, they always brought their kids with them too. So we we were close. Yeah, we always did things together. We go to the shore, or whatever it was, we would always go together. You
That's awesome.
yeah, that
What,
would
if you could describe each of Aunt Pat, Aunt Debbie, and my mom, what were they all like, and how were they different, and how were they alike?
your Aunt Pat and your Aunt Debbie are definitely a Blauser side of the family. Your
Yeah.
mother was a tailor. Now, she was Aunt Debbie was chubby. Your Aunt Pat was chubby. That's a Blauser trait. As you can tell when you look at me, we are chubby. Your sister, your mom was always lean. That was a Taylor trait. They were on the lean side. Your mother was tall and thin when I met her, and that's the way your mom was. She was definitely a Taylor. But like I said, we all got along well, and they used to play together outside the house. They had your Aunt Pat used to play with Barbie dolls, and they had the Black Cat nightclub that they went to with Barbies, and
Hmm.
they got along pretty good together.
Now, how old was my mom when you guys all moved to Florida?
When we moved to Florida, she was let's see, we moved there in 19. She was two.
Oh,
She
wow.
was about 2 years old.
She spent her whole childhood in Florida.
Oh yeah, she was. She had yeah, she did. She spent uh, her yeah, her life in Florida there. Yeah, the early part of it. She used to when we moved into our townhouse, I guess you would call it, in Deerfield Beach when we first moved down there.
Oh, so you first lived in Deerfield Beach. That was where you lived mostly, was
That's
Deerfield
right,
Beach.
in Deerfield Beach. We finally got an apartment in Deerfield Beach, and just it could have been a half a block away. There was a 7-Eleven store. Now, back in those days, the 7-Eleven stores weren't uh, like they are today. They
Also,
have
if you could pause for a second, why did you make the move to Fort Lauderdale and Deerfield Beach? Was it for
we
your
went
job?
down there because uh, I could see the handwriting on the wall when it came to Bethlehem Steel. They were a company that was on the way out.
Hmm.
What was happening was they couldn't compete anymore
Yeah.
because the union demands and one thing and another. They become very hard to compete with some companies that were smaller, and they were getting outbid on practically everything that they were doing. We had gone to Florida on vacation the year before, and I was never to Florida in my life until that vacation, and I really enjoyed it. And so the following year, we went back down again for another vacation. And that second time down, I was driving. I don't know what street in Fort Lauderdale I was on, but anyway, I saw Florida State Employment Service. And I just drove in there. I saw the sign,
Just
and
like when we
the
used to
next
go
thing
to
you know,
Burger
I'm,
King,
I'm
go to
parking the
Burger
car.
King, and you would just go, oh,
That's what happened. The next thing you know, I'm in the parking lot,
yeah.
and I went in, and I didn't expect they had a don't have anything for structural steel people here. This
Yeah.
is a tourist thing. I went in. Sure enough, there was two places that were looking for a structural steel draftsman. I went to steel fabricators. I liked what I saw. It was a company just 3 years old,
Hmm.
up and coming,
What was the company called?
steel fabricators.
Okay.
If you look that up on the internet, it's still in business today. And their son, his son is now the president of that company. And his son at the time used to be a pain in the neck to me. He used to crawl under my desk and get my pencils and move stuff around. And
Huh.
he would come to the office, the
Hmm.
boss's son, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But anyway, he went to Florida State, got his degree, and he's now running the company today. But anyway, Steel Fab offered me this job. I said, well, I wasn't thinking about coming down now. About next year, I was thinking of, because I wanted to get all my affairs in order
Hmm.
here in Pennsylvania, Bethlehem Steel. And so he said, okay, we'll go along with that. We
Wow.
come back home, and in July of that, we remember we were down there in June.
Hmm.
We came home from the vacation in June. In July, I got a phone call saying, hey, we need you awful bad. Can you possibly come down here now?
Hmm.
So I did. I packed the family up. We got in my Ford station wagon and we came to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in
Did
August.
they pay for you? Did they give you money to relocate?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope. We did it. But as it turned out, why, it worked out okay because uh, I never, the smartest thing I ever did,
Did they give
or
you a
I
pay
left
bump? Did
Bethlehem
they give you
Steel.
did they give you a pay bump a little bit or
I was making a little bit more than what I was making at Bethlehem Steel at that time.
and
I
why
was
was it the greatest decision you ever made?
because when I left Bethlehem Steel, let's see what, I think it was about 3 years later, Bethlehem Steel folded
Mm.
and went out of business. And I thought, oh, I did that just in time.
Mhm.
But the people that I worked for, the people that owned that company, were just wonderful people to work for. They uh, were did not like unions. He was definitely not a union man.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, he was not a racist. And in those early days uh, in the South,
Mhm.
when I first moved down there, there was still a bit of racism going on. These were the days of Martin Luther King and
Mhm.
what he was trying to do.
Mhm.
So he was not like that. He had plenty of blacks working for him. He had a lot of Cubans working for him.
Mhm.
He was a nice person, an intelligent man, and he treated his employees right.
Yeah.
He didn't need a union. He treated them better than a union did.
Yeah.
And like I said, the working conditions were so nice, and I enjoyed that work. We did a lot of building in Fort Lauderdale that I'm proud to be a part of. The post office that they have to this day in Fort Lauderdale, we built in our company on Commercial Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale. Practically every store on that street was built by our company. We did
Wow.
a, we even built a hospital in Saudi Arabia and sent our erection crew over there
Did you go there? Did you go over there?
I didn't go there. I wasn't on erection crew, but the erection crew did. They put the hospital up in Saudi Arabia, and
Wow.
the company grew and expanded to different branches. They had a branch called Door Masters, and their specialty was steel doors. Any kind of door that you would want for your structure was done by Door Masters,
Hmm.
and it was a great company too. And I left there I got a bonus, a leaving bonus of $111,000, which doesn't sound like very much today. But remember, when you go back to, uh,
Wait, 111,000? That's a lot of money.
yeah, that's how much I got from Steel Fab.
When you left
Yeah,
over, that's a
when I
lot of money.
retired, when I retired in 19, when I was 58, I decided I was going to retire, and
Yeah.
you know,
Hold
111,000.
on, let's see inflation. 111,000, 1990 compared to today. That's about uh, I'm about to do the calculation. This is 1990 or 1989?
1989. Actually, it was 1988.
Okay. Let's see and go. Okay, that was about $250,000 in today's world.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
that's
in
pretty
other
good.
words, that was what I left with. So they treated their employees very well, and I really really enjoyed working for that company. So I think it was a smart move because, like I said, things really went downhill a lot with Bethlehem Steel, and it was it was a great. We had a good life down there. We had a good life down there.
Oh yeah,
Your the friends that your Aunt Pat and Aunt Debbie made, she still to this day. In
yeah.
fact, the ones that your Aunt Debbie just went to see
They live in North Carolina. Yeah.
Carolina were the ones the friends that she had made while we living in Fort Lauderdale.
Now just pause one moment. All right, so we're now in the time frame of when you're in Florida. All the girls are growing up in Florida and whatnot. Um, you were describing each of them and what they looked like. What were their personalities like? Aunt Pat, Aunt Debbie, and my mom.
Well, their personalities were typical of the times. I would say they were, um, whatever was going on, they were a part of it. They used to, your Aunt Debbie, she was kind of the leader of the pack.
Of all
And
three of them?
um, yeah, well, leader of no of the pack, as a gang that they ran around with.
Okay.
The girls didn't hang. What when they got into this age? Now we're talking when we lived on in Fort Lauderdale. They're older now. They what age would they be now? In their early teens, mid teens, in that era. Um, they kind of had their own group of friends. And your Aunt Debbie was the leader of her pack. And
Hmm.
I can see her walking down the street with uh, her gang following her, and they were just doing whatever the kids did at those times. They were. Um,
Chris was the leader of a lot of our social packs growing up too.
who
Chris somewhat was.
was
Chris
he?
Pecci.
Yeah, yeah.
Somewhat. Sometimes he would be, yeah.
Someone, yeah, that he was. That well, that um,
Alex probably could have been considered that too at times.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the girls kind of Pat never seemed to get into a group, or she never was a big. She had a couple of friends, but uh, they were like one or two friends that she hung out with. She wasn't a group person. And even to this day, your Aunt Pat doesn't like a lot of people around her.
Yeah.
She's likes to be, but your Aunt Debbie, on the other hand, is just the opposite that
Yeah.
way. She likes a lot of people around her.
What was my mom like? Did she like
And
a lot of people?
mother, she had her little group. Uh, she was a what's the word I'm looking for? She was an aggressive type person. She, yeah, she wouldn't take any nonsense off of her cousin. Your mother's sister lived next door to us for a little bit of time, and
Yeah.
their two sons, Philip and
So Eva's kids?
yeah, yeah, Eva's kids. Uh, Philip uh, said something to, and he's a little older than Lisa, but he said something she didn't like. She punched him in the mouth, and Philip ran home crying to his mommy. And Lisa hit me. Lisa hit me. But she was that type of person. She would,
Yeah.
and unfortunately for her, that aggressiveness got her into a lot of trouble later on in life.
Yeah.
But she was very aggressive.
Where do you
Yeah,
think she got that from? I guess from the Taylor side of the family?
I
Like,
think so. I think that was a lot of her.
what did you try to do to stop her from being so aggressive?
What did we do? We tried to show her that this wasn't right.
Yeah.
You do the best you can to tell her no, don't do that, don't do this. But
Yeah.
it worked sometimes, and sometimes, most of the time, it didn't. She was very, very and she uh, was sort of a loner type
My mom?
girl. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. She had a few friends. She had a few friends, but she was always kind of a loner type
Hmm.
girl. She'd like to do things on her own. But
Hmm.
that was just her nature to be that way.
Yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, things didn't work out well on her side, but
Yeah.
nothing we can do about that.
What were some of your what were some memories you have from Florida that really stick out to you? Out of, you were there for 30 years, so there's a lot in between there.
Yeah, there was, oh boy, some of the things that stick out. Let me see. One of the things that stick out in my mind is when your Aunt Pat came down with myasthenia gravis and was down in the Jefferson Hospital in Miami.
Hmm.
Uh, those trips down to Miami to the hospital stand out in my mind a lot.
Yeah.
The worry that we had to go through, that we went through at that time concerning her health stands out in my mind. Um, then, on the other hand, her marriage, when she and Uncle Manny got married, that stands out in my mind. The reception at our house stands out.
Yeah.
And, uh, when you were, uh, we bought our house, that stands out in my mind. When we got our condo in Coral Springs, that stands out in my mind a lot. And when we took the family, our first trip to Disney World, that stands out in my family. We made the mistake of going to Disney World, which is in Orlando, Florida, in the month of August. The worst,
Oh.
the worst thing we could have done. The heat was unbearable, but we had a good time. But here again, we went as a family,
Hmm.
and we enjoyed. Those trips to Disney World always stand out in my mind. And some of the things that, like I said, that stand out. Debbie leading her pack down 8th Avenue, doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Sort of things stand out in my mind. But we had a good time down there.
Yeah.
We did good. But then uh, toward the end, before I came back up, I was working two jobs. I worked for the Florida Merchant Police as well as the steel fabricators. And and then later on, we got so busy at Steel Fab that we were working like 60 hours a week. And it did, and this wasn't just for a week or two. This was month in, month out. And that started to really drain me, as well as your grandmother was really starting to mind the heat. And Florida seemed was getting warmer and warmer and warmer. I can remember when we first moved to Florida, in the wintertime, you could wear a sport jacket and it felt comfortable wearing that to work.
Mm-hmm.
But later, before I left, Jesus, just to wear a shirt was too much. It was so darn hot.
Yeah.
Anyway, she started to really mind the heat, and it seemed to get warmer down there. And so we decided, oh, well, we'll just call it quits. Maybe we'll have to work up here. We'll find something. But as it turned out, we didn't need to do that. She did for a while, but
Yeah.
we came back, and I retired in 1958.
1988.
I mean,
1988.
1980, 58. I was 58 years old when we
Yeah.
retired in 88. Yeah.
And then my mom stayed down there, right? Obviously, and she was doing all her stuff.
That was your dad. Yeah.
Were they
Yeah.
always together, or like were they like? Did you know my dad?
Were,
Or
they were together for a while. Yeah. And he had a rather good business too. I mean, you heard like a car when you, what's that term they use for automobiles when you clean them really good?
yeah, like
Well, he did the same thing with, with, hold on a minute.
uh,
Oh, Pat.
you're good.
Oh, detailing. Your dad had a
Auto detailing.
detailing business, but not with cars. He did it with aircraft.
Wow.
So he had an aircraft detailing business. And he liked boats. He had a boat. I think we have a picture of you on the boat with him at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was pretty successful that
Did
way.
you interact with him? Did you?
Oh, we did, yeah, to a certain degree. Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
see him that often.
Yeah.
And it was like I said, I was working so many hours that the only time I had off was like on a Sunday, and that's the only day of the week that was that. So I was kind of limited because of just working so many hours that we didn't have very much of a social life
Yeah.
at that time. And but we did, yeah. He would come over for meals and just come over to talk. Yeah, he
Okay.
even came up here once. Do you remember when he came up here?
I do.
After we picked up, yeah. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So what was it like moving back to Spring City from Florida?
that was I can remember this. We moved back, and it was in the winter months, and I can remember taking stuff out of the car, out of the parking lot, and I said, "Oh my God, it feels so good to be cold." It was so stinking hot. It was so stinking hot
Yeah.
down there, and it did. But we came back up here, went through all the stuff we go through to get the place together. We met Betty and Jack, and we used to go out with them. Betty was a friend of your mother's whom she knew since back before your Aunt Debbie was born.
Okay.
And she got divorced and had a new husband. And we went out with Betty and Jack a lot, played cards with them a lot. And
Did
that's
Nana
how,
play cards? Did Nana play cards?
Mhm.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how we found out we had a grandson. We got to go, guess what? Lisa had a baby. And we found out
I guess it
Michael,
wasn't planned. Was it planned or not? It probably wasn't planned at the time, but
I don't know, because they had you down, you were down in Broward General Hospital. That's where Mikey was born. Broward General, Fort Lauderdale.
yeah.
And The rest is history, Mike.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
What was it like having myself as a grandchild?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Yes, you were a pretty good baby. You didn't uh, cause much commotion or anything. I can remember taking you down to DuPont Hospital and having them look you over and what you recommended, what you had to do, and one thing and another, which we did.
Because
And then
you guys took custody of me, right? You guys picked me up from a McDonald's parking lot, right?
it was a Burger King.
Burger King parking lot, yeah.
Burger. They wouldn't allow us to come to the Foster house for some reason. And the reason being, I think, is because they was probably a bad, a bad place. It
Oh,
wasn't. I got that feeling. I don't know. Why would you have a child picked up in the parking lot of a Burger King if it was legit? You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So anyway, we got you, and we got you back to Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
and we got you on the right track. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was
What was when me, Chris, and Alex were born as kids, what were we like?
what were you kids like?
Yeah.
Well, you were typical boys, I think, getting into as much trouble as you could, and I don't have to remind you of all the stuff that you guys did. You are well aware of it, and we don't need to bring that up now.
Yeah.
Uh, but you did things that kids did. That's all. But
Yeah.
you finally got your head screwed on right, and
Yeah.
and that was that. So,
That's
but
good.
yeah, you were. It was wonderful having Michael born. I can remember holding you in my arms, and this one night in particular, your mother and your grandmother went out somewhere, and I was watching you. I
Mhm.
was holding you, and you were crying and crying. And I said, "Michael, come on, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Just crying and crying. As soon as your mom and grandmom got home, you stopped crying. You stopped instantly. As soon as they walked through the door, bloop, no more crying. I thought that little son of a gun. He just didn't.
I do
He just,
remember you at one point chasing me up and down the living room a little bit, like
oh yeah,
back when you were in your 60s.
yeah, right, way back. Yeah, we used to have fun in the grocery stores and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then I used to drive you over to your house, Michael. Now Michael, you remember that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was. We had a good time. We
Yeah.
had fun times. That
Yeah.
was it. Now it's your turn.
It'll be my turn probably soon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
We're getting married in September of 2022 and
yeah,
at your favorite place at Reading Terminal.
yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
No,
great.
I think this is valuable getting to understand everything prehistory before I come into the world because obviously I wasn't there and for future generations of people of my kids and others that are going to see this one day it'll be very special for them.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah.
And we got many more years with you around so who knows what can happen, right? I mean, we didn't
Yeah.
know Nana was gonna have Alzheimer's when she had it, right? And we didn't. So like, I just wanted to make sure we had some of this recorded in some type of way before anything were to happen.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's good. And when next month I'll be 90 years old. So once you reach 90, it's day by day, buddy. It's day by day. So
Yeah.
that's it. So it's a good thing to
But
have.
things like this will help you, use your mind more, and it'll help
Yeah,
you like,
yeah.
Pat says you're trying to get more mobile. You're trying to move better so that you can move for the wedding too.
Well, that I can move fairly good if I have my walker,
Yeah.
but it just seems that the thing that's hard for me is that uh, Well, I guess it's just old age, one part, and the other is the pain in the back. But the walker really, really helps a lot with that. So if I
Yeah.
have my walker, I'm okay.
Are you gonna be
For
able to stay
not
up?
for
You gonna
not for
stay
a
up all
long
night?
period, but pretty good.
Are you gonna be able to stay up all night when it comes to September of 2022?
All night.
Yeah.
Oh, I doubt that.
You
Well,
remember that song? Do you remember the 24th night of September?
we'll remember that 22nd, 24th of September, right?
Yeah.
24th, right? I told you what I thought you said the first time when you said, I thought you said the 24th of December. And I thought, well, that's a funny time to get married. Who's
No.
going to come?
Yeah, right. No one will come.
Yeah.
No one will come. All right, Papa. Well, I love you very much, and thank you for taking the time to do this, so I can understand more of your history and everything you've been through. And yeah, that's the end of the recording.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael. I love you too, my boy. Take care.
Take care.
Okay, hon. Bye.